You mentioned over the healthcare thing that even if it is defeated, that we have certain treaties and that they're going to go through the court system to force it on us. How can we fight that?
Gee, that's a very good question, because we've been so indoctrinated into believing that the Supreme Court is actually interpreting the Constitution. That's where you have to come with leadership at the state level for interposition and nullification. But if you read the UN Charter, it has a Declaration of Rights. And then there are various protocols called the Civil and Economic Protocols that we signed in the 1970s. And it specifically says that anybody in any country has access to education, which is supposed to be free. That includes higher education. That means also you have health care. You're guaranteed to a job or benefits, whether you're American or not. I mean, it's just almost out of the Communist Manifesto. So here's what the court did. In 1920, they did this. It's something, you mentioned the 10th Amendment. Here's what Oliver Wendell Holmes said about the 10th Amendment in 1920. So the 10th Amendment supposedly has reserved powers to the states, right? Here's what Oliver Holmes said. To understand what the 10th Amendment reserved to the states, you have to understand what this country has become. In other words, as the national government grows bigger and has more responsibilities, its powers expand and the powers of the states contract. That is in Missouri v. Hall in 1920, Oliver Wendell Holmes. You think the 10th Amendment movement's used for it is, but it can be swatted down like a fly by the courts. That's why I talked about interposition and nullification. Is you're going to have some type of leadership where people are going to stand up and say, this is a fraud, this isn't constitutional, and we're not going to do it. Right now, what they're teaching in the schools, something like that is treasonable. Something like that is, quote, domestic terrorism. Well, so what? We know it's not. But the important thing is, when it comes to 10th Amendment issues or anything else like that, health care, cap and trade, if we, the Kyoto Treaty, once that's a treaty, just like the Panama Canal, Carter didn't have to go to the Senate to get ratification. He could have done it through executive agreements. So just like with treaty, let me put it this way, treaties supersede just about everything else in the Constitution, including the 10th and 9th Amendments. I asked my class, because we're studying this and we're looking at the rhetoric, the First Amendment says the Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. The Congress shall make no law. This is nothing about the states. And for years the Supreme Court said the states can do what they want with religion. It depends upon their own constitutions and the political preferences of the states. They changed that in 1947 by coming up with this nonsense that the First Amendment is incorporated into the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which is applicable to the states. But the Supreme Court is a big problem. And the Supreme Court wasn't supreme until 1819, when the Chief Justice Marshall said it's supreme over the state Supreme Courts. But originally, the state Supreme Courts had parity with the U.S. Supreme Court. It's all a big fraud. And the American people, that's why you need somebody up there saying this. That's why you need the von Mises Institute. Let their economists have some input into the legislative process. That's Ron Paul's institute. That's the one that Ron Paul, as his economics, his public political economy, based upon. Yes, ma'am.
You're a little disparaging regarding Marco Rubio. What type of contrast and comparison can you make with your feelings or your sincerity versus his?
Okay, good question. I was disparaging about Marco Rubio. I was disparaging about Marco Rubio, and how do I compare myself to his candidacy? Okay, first of all, Rubio is a professional politician.
Yeah.
He was Speaker of the Florida House, and he's groomed his public policy record and agenda for higher office. He'll do what it takes when it comes to getting to the highest level. His aspiration is on the presidency. It's not necessarily representing Florida. He'll represent Florida to the extent that it promotes his political career. But where's Marco Rubio on immigration, illegal immigration?
Right, we know where it's at.
What happened when it came to things like affirmative action in the state of Florida? What about he was Speaker of the House, probably the second most powerful person in the state. What about the regulations that business people have to adhere to? What about school vouchers? Yeah, they have school vouchers, but through regulatory reload, they're regulating charter schools as if they're public schools. There's no real competition between government and private schools anymore. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding. He's a very formidable candidate. He's articulate. He's much smarter than Chris, which might make him more dangerous. But, you know, he's one of those guys that, like I said, a professional politician, and you'll get more of the same.
I have thought something tonight, but if you were to represent Florida, would you allow any drilling offshore so we can become independent for the Senate? Okay,
if I represented Florida, would I allow drilling or support drilling offshore? And as a U.S. Senator, I have my personal preference. You know, when it comes to economics, I'm a libertarian. But I would say that's up for the people of Florida to decide, not for the...
That's
right.
It's still, but as a U.S. Senator, with you know, federalism, I'm not going to say that I know any better than the people of Florida. If Floridians want to drill offshore, even if it's in so-called U.S. territorial waters, that should be their decision.
Right.
So,
that's right.
Many Floridians support it, many don't. Look, as a senator, I'm not a know-it-all. I know probably a lot about politics, but the collective wisdom, if the people still have the political virtue that the framers anticipated or hoped for, the collective wisdom of Florida is much superior to any one individual. Now, if it's a real, you know, if it's a system that facilitates and you have real open debate, if Floridians realize that if you're an environmentalist, why do you say we can't drill off the coast of Florida, but we support drilling off, you know, someplace in South America? They have an environment too, so they just charge us more for the oil that we could be drilling right here at home. So it just... Yes, sir.
Will you give us your views on illegal immigration and what do you think we should do about it?
Illegal immigration and what should we do about it? That's where the federal government, the national government, has really dropped the ball.
Amen.
And what we're supposed to do about it, after they've made such a mess out of it, you know, it's very difficult. It's one of those very difficult questions. We've all benefited from illegal immigration, from the lower cost of producing food, building homes. But I would say that if the law says it's unlawful to hire an illegal immigrant, you need to enforce the law. And I don't believe in deportation, because if the law is enforced, those people will voluntarily go back home. But look, the Republicans love illegal immigration because it's a cheap source of labor and it's a union buster. Democrats love it because it's cheap votes and it creates a whole class that's dependent upon the national government for their subsistence. The third party position would be something along the lines, this is the law. If you don't like the law, then we have an open debate and change it. But we need to start enforcing the rule of law, whether it's illegal immigration or anything else. Look, 50% of all the laws on the